Ukraine's counter-offensive plans have been given a major boost, with the US announcing it's sending more guns and ammunition. Thousands of Sudanese fled their capital city as a second ceasefire in the six-day clash between warring generals failed to hold. A new climate report confirms 2022 was Europe's second warmest year ever, with the hottest summer since records began. Ukraine is gearing up for an expected counter-offensive against the Russian invaders with extra help from the USA. President Zelensky inspected the Ukraine-Poland-Belarus border junction, where fortifications, barriers and remote video surveillance systems are being installed. The move could indicate Ukraine's readiness to repel a possible attack from their neighbouring country Belarus, Russia's main ally. As Kyiv prepares new units of border guards, the White House has announced a new $325 million package of artillery ammunition.
На рівні держави робиться все, щоб збільшувати можливість захищати і захищатися від російських ударів. Системи ППО та інша зброя для захисту неба вже зараз у нас в Україні дуже серйозні, але мають бути і впевнений будуть ще потужніші.
Ahead of the NATO summit in July, the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, visiting Sweden, called on Turkey and Hungary to ratify Sweden's application for NATO membership. He said it will mean a stronger alliance and a more secure Europe, praising Sweden's military capabilities, particularly in the Baltic Sea region. From April the 24th, Bulgaria will ban imports of Ukrainian grain. It's the fourth EU member to introduce a unilateral ban to protect its own harvests and cereal markets, a trend causing embarrassment in Brussels, which aims to project a supportive stance towards the war-torn country. But for Bulgaria and others, charity begins at home.
Имаме продукция за няколко милиарда, която считаме, че ако не вземем допълнителни мерки, трудно ще реализираме на пазара и ще търпим много сериозни загуби.
Romania is also considering a ban. For the moment, its Minister of Agriculture has announced that Romania will intensify checks on grain imported from Ukraine. Trucks will be sealed and monitored by GPS during transit through the country.
Am rugat ministrul ucrainean să folosească toate mijloacele pe care le are la dispoziție pentru ca agenții economici din Ucraina să reducă exportul de cereale și plante oleaginoase către România.
The EU has rushed to quell the revolt, arguing for a common European approach, as customs policy should be united across the bloc.
You will recall that we have already provided a support package of 56.3 million euros for the most affected farmers, and we are now preparing a second financial support package of 100 million euros.
On Wednesday, Poland decided to partially lift its ban, but only to allow transit across its territory, not the sale of Ukrainian grain on it. Hundreds of trucks laden with Ukrainian grain had been stranded at the border. Amid criticism of his controversial pension reform, the French president visited rural France, hoping to calm tensions and move forward. It's not saucepans that are going to allow France to move forward, said Emmanuel Macron when asked about the protests to his reform. Some demonstrators greeted him with whistles and banging pans. Others gave him a piece of their mind.
Cette colère s'exprime, je ne m'attendais pas à autre chose, mais elle ne m'empêchera pas de continuer à me déplacer partout à travers le pays, parce que nous devons continuer d'agir et d'avancer.
On Thursday, Macron will be visiting a school in the Hérault region to discuss education. After 3 months of protests and anger, last Friday the government passed the law that will raise the pension age from 62 to 64. Fighting in Sudan enters its 6th day as a ceasefire between the army and the powerful paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, failed. This is the second ceasefire they've broken. Thousands of residents have fled the capital Khartoum, so have some 320 soldiers who were detained in neighbouring Chad.
J'ai déjà 320 militaires qui sont déjà dans notre territoire. Ça, c'est des militaires. Et sans doute, les civils, il y en a. Donc, nous sommes en train de les accueillir et de prendre toutes les dispositions pour qu'ils soient aussi bien cantonnés.
The violent clashes have already left more than 270 civilians dead and more than 2,000 injured, according to the World Health Organization. Germany and Japan are reportedly planning the evacuation of their citizens. The UN will meet on Thursday with the African Union, the Arab League and representatives of other organizations to discuss the situation in Sudan.
At least 70 people were killed and 110 more wounded in a crowd crush in the Yemeni capital Sanaa during a distribution of financial aid. The accident took place when hundreds of people gathered at a school to receive money handed out by merchants during Ramadan. The Houthi-run Interior Ministry's spokesperson blamed the disaster on the random distribution of funds without coordination with local authorities. Those responsible for the event were detained and an investigation is underway.
Europe experienced its second warmest year ever recorded in 2022. The Copernicus Climate Change Service annual report shows that Europe also saw its hottest summer on record last year, at 1.4 degrees Celsius above the recent average, compounded by several extreme events. Temperatures are rising at twice the global average rate, faster than any other continent. Much of Europe suffered intense and prolonged heat waves, with southern Europe being specially affected by very strong heat stress. Globally, the last 8 years have been the warmest on record. Carbon emissions from summer wildfires were the highest in 15 years. The lack of winter snow and the high summer temperatures resulted in a record loss of 5 cubic kilometres of ice from glaciers in the Alps.
In Austria, the wind against so-called climate stickers is getting rougher. While parts of the government demand prison sentences for the street blockers, a leading figure from the last generation climate movement could now be deported. German-born Anja Windel has been summoned to the Foreigners Office.
Ob ich aus Österreich ausgewiesen werde, ist ja noch eine Frage der Zeit, beziehungsweise muss ich ja abwarten, ob ich da jemals einen Bescheid auch zugestellt bekomme. Ich schätze mal eher ja, dass sie es auch probieren werden. Es ist mitunter relativ schmerzhaft, insbesondere wenn man mit der Hand in der vergangenen Zeit schon öfter geklebt hat, dann wird es mit jedem Mal ist die Hautirritation größer.
Mit einem Nagellackentferner lösen die Polizisten die Hände vom Asphalt. Seit über einem Jahr blockiert die letzte Generation Österreichs Straßen im Frühverkehr. Eine der zentralen Forderungen, ein greifendes Klimaschutzgesetz.
For more than 800 days, Austrian politicians have been negotiating a new law that would regulate CO2 limits in many parts of the country, after a previous law expired in 2020.
Ich mache mich stark für einen raschen Beschluss dieses Klimaschutzgesetzes. Es ist kein Geheimnis. Könnte ich es allein beschließen, hätten wir schon eines. Aber ich brauche dafür eine parlamentarische Mehrheit. Ich brauche dafür in einer Demokratie eine Mehrheit der Abgeordneten und an der arbeite ich hart.
The Last Generation movement has announced a wave of protests in May. For at least 3 weeks, major traffic intersections in Vienna are expected to be blocked.
The European Union is taking a huge step forwards when it comes to tackling environmental destruction, after the European Parliament voted on Wednesday to ensure that products on the EU market are deforestation-free. Companies will very soon have to prove that what they sell has no link to deforestation from 2021 onwards, both in Europe and throughout the world. The list includes, among other things, palm oil, coffee, soy and wood. The MEP in charge of the new law says the rules are a significant achievement.
We are losing every year around 10 million hectares of forests all over the world, and this instrument is going to halt that, at least our part in the complicity in that deforestation, because our shelves are currently filled with chocolate, coffee, etc., soy products that contribute massively to the forest destruction, around 10% of this 10 million yearly.
Companies will have to provide information to the relevant EU authorities, like geolocation coordinates from which satellite images of the area can be assessed for any possible forest degradation or deforestation. If they fail to comply with the rules, businesses can be fined. Critics argue that the new measures will push up the cost of goods, but the Greens in the European Parliament say this would only be in the short term.
What we try to push is to push for one economy towards another model of economy, an economy where we destroy the planet, where we destroy also conditions of life for a certain number of people, towards an economy where we do respect nature and people. And this can have, of course, a price that is felt on the consumers at start, but in a really short time, this would change how the economy is structured, and then the price wouldn't be so high for the people. It would just be somehow a transition, a shift towards another model.
Protecting the rights of indigenous people is another requirement for products entering the EU market. Once the rules come into force, businesses and traders will have 18 months to implement them, with smaller companies given longer. Christopher Pitchers for Euronews.
The Earth, Moon and Sun lined up perfectly, with the Moon covering the Sun, causing a rare type of total solar eclipse called a hybrid solar eclipse. It was seen through telescopes at the Perth Observatory and Learmonth Solar Observatory, south of Exmouth on the west coast of Australia. In the early morning of Thursday, people gathered in Australia, Indonesia and East Timor to watch the phenomenon. It occurs just a handful of times every 100 years.